So this is the time that I will introduce to Allan, who is our guest speaker today. Uh, so I have read, I think the first book I've read from Allan about a year and a half ago. It was the project Myopia, and it kind of put in really nice words how I saw and how I felt that the project model was. So it was really nice to see that someone kind of could put in nice words in a nice way, um, all those thoughts. And from there on, I started following from far, obviously, the work that Ellen has been doing. I've read a few more books, and I was thrilled when I invited Ellen and he accepted to come to our meetup. So without any further ado, Ellen, please introduce yourself and tell us why the project model is dead or should be killed. I think you're on mute, Alan.
I am now unmuted.
Now, yes,
Thank you very
yes.
much for those kind
I,
words.
and sorry. By the way, I will just post on the chat the Slido link and the feedback form, and I will remind you again later on to do the same. So now, sorry, I know that you were on mute, but you were swearing about the project model, I'm sure. So
I was actually going to say I feel as if I've I'm hoping this presentation marks a kind of a break point in lockdown, would you believe? Because it looks crazy now looking back on it, but I went to Agile on the Beach, New Zealand in March. And when I flew out there, COVID was breaking and countries were starting to lock down. And I was like, is this a sensible thing to do? And I flew all the way around the world to get to New Zealand and spend 2 days at a conference, a few more days in New Zealand, and came back. And 2 days after I came back, we locked down. And the reason for mentioning this is we are here virtually at Vodafone. And I know a lot of this is, if this was physical, we hosted by Vodafone. So thank you, Vodafone. And I know a lot of you are with Vodafone. When I was at Agile on the Beach, New Zealand, there was a lot of Vodafone New Zealand people there. Vodafone New Zealand had this background role. Now, I believe the two of you are separating. You're going your different ways, but that's another story. So hopefully, coming back to the Vodafone environment, lockdown can be a thing of the past. Okay, so for a few years, I've been going around dissing projects and saying why projects, and I like to talk about the project model, not any particular project, but the model of working as project, and defined scope and all the rest of it. I like to talk about the model. And for years, I've been going around saying why it's not a good idea. And it's a thumping talk and it really rouses the audience, but I became more and more conscious about I wasn't really offering anything a solution here. I was just talking about the problems. And I think sometimes that can be worthwhile. Giving a critique, it shares a common language. And I should say, I wasn't alone in creating no projects. I'll tell you more about it in a moment. And it did culminate. I'll switch the virtual background off a bit. It did culminate in this book, Project Myopia. But you'll notice actually slim volume, because I split out the what to do instead into a much bigger volume. So they're kind of twins there. And so this talk, what I'd like to try and do here is talk less about why projects aren't so good and more about why there's an alternative. And for me, more and more, when I look at the alternative, it's all about the fact that we're now living in a digital age. And I think those of us who come from an IT background, we often fail to appreciate just how much of a change digital is, because we've been in digital computing for years. Those STEAM ones never caught on. But for people outside of a technology background, from outside the IT department, for them, digital is massive. When they use the word digital, what they are saying is, my world now looks like your world. The world we have been living in of computers and bits and bytes and spreadsheets and email, everybody's world looks like that. Okay, there's a few businesses that don't, but overwhelmingly the growth businesses are digital. And all digital is you know, it's a cliche, it's disrupting everything. But what it means is the world many of us have been living in for several decades. Now, other people are coming there and they need to be part of our world. Okay. So without further ado, let me get started. And let me start by posing a question to you. What are the scarce resources you have today? You could try typing this in the chat window if you wanted, but I'll just leave it to you to think. You know, when you're trying to get work done, what is it you can't get enough of? What would you like more of? Just think about that, and we'll come back to it in a bit. Right, going way back, 2013, myself and Steve Smith in the middle there, Joshua Arnold at the bottom, and then Evan Laborn, we took our careers in our hands and we made ourselves pretty much unemployable by going around and using this hashtag, no projects. I think Josh was the first one. And in truth, we weren't unique in this, and I remember having a conversation with Mary Poppendike and some people from ThoughtWorks in 2001, and we were all in agreement, projects is an awful way of managing work, but nobody wanted to say so because so much business and work is dependent on projects. So in 2013, to start saying don't use projects was like saying don't employ me, which is just not a good move. But we started using this hashtag, and it was very much a Twitter movement. And the interesting thing is that I started using it for one bunch of reasons, and Josh originally used it the first time for a whole bunch of reasons, and my reasons were a bit different from Josh's, and his were a bit different from Steve's, and Evan had a slightly different take again, and somehow it synthesized. So we started saying crazy things like projects are a big batch size. You set out to do a big chunk of work, and big batch is risk. We know from lean manufacturing, lean product development, that you want small batch sizes. You don't want big, but projects lump everything together. So you lump it all together and you increase risk. We started saying projects damage quality. You know, if you're on a project, particularly a project that's running late, and you're looking at those bug reports, it's really, the debate is, how many do you accept? Yes, we're nominally fixing them, but how many of these are we prepared to accept? How low will we go? And while I should say, you know, we're not doing the refactoring. We leave refactoring and code improvement for the people who come after us. For me, one of the big things is the project model is the management of temporary endeavors. A bunch of people who create something and then disband and move on. And software is a permanent thing. We might talk about it being permanent. And yeah, we can all think of little apps that got thrown away after a few weeks. But successful software lingers. Look at the billing systems that underpin a company like Vodafone. You know, look at the banking systems. Look at the bank exchange systems. They're years old. We build these things by doing temporary endeavors, but actually our product lasts for a long time. Only failed software really dies. We started pointing out that project planning is control. When some nice person draws you a Gantt chart and decides what your team's going to be and sets out a release schedule and they give it to you, well, that's a form of control, isn't it? That people are imposing controls. We talk about autonomous teams, but even a little bit of a project schedule and you've lost control, you're beholden to somebody else. And yeah, I think we all know by now, requirements don't work. You can write down as much as you like. It goes in one eye, out the other. The bigger a document is, the less likely it is to be read. And the bigger a document is, if it is read, the less they'll be remembered. And we find, as we're working, we find different things. You know, you're 6 months into a multi-year project. The requirements document is starting to take a back seat. A year into a multi-year project, the requirement document can go hang itself. You're discovering new stuff, new important things. We know through cost of delay that projects destroy value because projects batch things together and delay the release. So because you're not releasing things when they're ready, you get cost of delay and that destroys value. We get a scenario called commitment escalation. So you get your perfect project plan, your perfect requirements. Your boss gives you $1 million, and you go away and you work on this for a year, and then you go back to your boss and say, we spent the money and we haven't got anything to show for it. We're still testing it, by which we mean test, fix, test, fix. And your boss thinks, oh, if I don't give them another $250,000, they're going to fail. And I've got to explain to my boss why I just let them waste $1 million. So I'll give them $250,000. And you go back a few months later and the same story. You then spend $1.5 million. And when you do go to the big boss goes, I better give them another $500,000, because if I don't, I've got to explain to somebody why I let my younglings spend $2 million with nothing to show for it. Sunk cost, but the more sunk cost you have, the harder it is to walk away from this. And the big one, software has diseconomies of scale. You are all used to walking into your local supermarket. In the days when you did walk into a local supermarket, you're all used to walking in there. And when you go to buy milk, you expect that a large carton of milk, 4 pints of milk, sorry, this is US clip art, so yeah, a large carton of milk will cost less than buying the equivalent amount of milk in 4 small cartons. And that is absolutely true of milk. It's economies of scale. And we are wired from a very early age to believe this. You don't need to study operations management or economics to get this. Everybody gets it. In fact, there are even stories in newspapers when people find the local supermarket charging less for multiple small ones than one big one. Economies of scale are very real, and so much of our businesses depend on them. But while it's true for milk, it isn't true for software development. Anyone who's been in the industry for a few years will have seen with their own eyes maybe, that a team of 5 will be far more productive than a team of 15. The team of 15 may produce more in total, but per person, per delivery, the team of 5 will produce more. And a team of 15 will produce more per person than a team of 50. And we know that when you inject small stories into a pipeline, the small stories flow through the pipeline, drop out the other end, and start earning you a return on investment a lot faster than when you put a large story in. In fact, when you put a large story into a pipeline, you've got more risks. There's more that can go wrong. When you have the stories that depend on each other, there's more risks. And when it comes to testing a small batch, testing an individual change is a damn sight easier than testing one of these big releases we love doing, where we put 50 things together to give it a proper UAT and a complete soak test. If you test one small thing and another small thing and another small thing, it's more efficient than when you test things together. When you test things together, you've got to test all the individual things, and then you've got to connect all the interactions. And if something goes wrong, you've got a lot of places to look for the problem. If you are just testing one small fix at a time, one small change, and something goes wrong, you've got a very small pool to fish in. Suppose you do 1 release a year. And you do 1 release a year, and 1 release a year goes wrong and blue screens a user's machine. If you're doing 1 release a year, that is 100% of your releases that screw up. If you do 1 release a week, and that same defect slips through, and that same defect blue screens somebody's machine, that is 2% of your releases. It's counterintuitive, but in software, so many things make sense when you go small. Instead of running to big, run to small. Always go small. But the project model encourages us to go large. So diseconomies of scale does not match the project model. And finally, on a project model, we talked about risk. The project model collects a phenomenon which sociologists call goal displacement. You are all familiar with the project success criteria: on schedule, on budget, on quality. That's fine, except where's the value? Where's the benefit in delivering this project? The success criteria are predicated on the belief that not only can you identify what will deliver value in advance, but that you have identified it correctly. And if all you do is just deliver that identified thing in some nominated schedule, then you will generate that benefit. But you end up with teams who are focused on schedule, budget, and quality, and they lose track of the benefit. They don't focus on the benefit, and benefit is harder to identify. Benefit is harder to pin down. But when we don't focus on benefit, when we have schedule, budget, and quality, people push away benefit. They don't even try and think of it. They move on. So this is what sociologists call goal displacement. Faced with a hard problem like how do we deliver value to the company, it's far easier to focus on how do we stay on schedule and on budget. So there's problems with the project model. Hence the 2 books, Project Myopia, The Problems, Continuous Digital, Hopefully the Solution. I want to take you back for a moment. I want us to go back in time. I've got my time machine here. We're traveling back to time 0. And as you all know, time 0 is January the 1st, 1970. So let's remember the world as it was in 1970. The planes flying in and out of Heathrow would be de Havilland Comets, world-leading plane. Small problem with it crashing a bit too often and those square windows, but you know, British aerospace led the world. Richard Nixon was president of the United States. I guess some things don't really change, do they? He was elected to stop the war in Vietnam. He actually invaded Cambodia in 1970. The World Cup was in Mexico, and Pele scored the winning goal. It was the year Apollo 13. Fantastic success, snatched out of the jaws of defeat. And here in the UK, Edward Heath became Prime Minister, a man whose life's mission was to lead us into the European Union. 1970 was a very different world, but there was something else that happened in 1970. This is the model you love or you hate. This is a model rooted in the world of Pele, Nixon, Heath, comets, Apollo 13. That's what we're talking about here. This was also slightly out here. 1968 was the year that the Project Management Institute came into being. So they were new babes in 1970. 1970, your hardware looked like this, an IBM Model 360, and in color, it looked like that. Here's the vital statistics. 10 MIPS of power. They actually talk about 10,000 kips, which is 10 MIPS to us today. I was surprised to discover it had 4 megabytes of RAM. And you programmed in COBOL on OS 360. Wonderful. Hierarchical database, IMS. Again, we've gone full circle. We've come back to where we started. 4 years ago, in 2016, I bought my children a computer. Oh yes, one last point on the IBM. It costs you $250,000 to rent. In 2020 prices, that's about $1.75 million. I'm using 2016 as a baseline here because in 2016, I bought my children one of these, a Raspberry Pi computer. This has 4,744 MIPS. Yes, 474 times more power than the IBM mainframe. It had 1 gigabyte of RAM, just a mere 256 times more. You programmed a Linux operating system in Python or Scala, or you could get Open COBOL if you wanted it. Open source. Open source didn't really exist in 1970. There were about 2 internet nodes. There was a library of COBOL, which if you wrote to Grace Hooper, she could send you fragments of COBOL programs that might fix your problem. She did really keep a library of this stuff as an early instance of open source. The important thing about that Raspberry Pi computer, apart from the fact it leaves the IBM mainframe for dust, is it cost me the equivalent of $35 US to buy outright. Think about that. In 1970, 10 MIPS cost you $250,000 a month to rent. In 2016, and still in 2020, 4,744 can be yours for a mere $30. In 1970, CPU cycles were expensive. Planning was cheap. With CPU cycles that are that expensive, it made absolute sense in 1970 to plan everything in as much detail as you could before you put your hands on the keyboard. You do not want to waste precious CPU cycle and dollars with programmers writing anything they don't need to. It makes sense for testing to be manual. It makes sense for project managers to draw up detailed schedules of what you're going to do. And it makes absolute sense to write requirements documents and sign them in blood to make sure nobody does anything they shouldn't. In 2020 and 2016, CPU cycles are so cheap. Like nuclear power, you might say they're too cheap to meter, except Google and Amazon do meter them and they do charge you, don't they? Planning is expensive. Planning, which is a human act, which involves people at desks and paper, or spreadsheets and Microsoft Project. Human activity is expensive. The economics have changed. It makes perfect sense to move as much as you can onto the machine. You want the machine to do your work. It's cheap to do something and it's cheap to try. About 3 years ago, I was working with a large bank here in the UK, and one morning I spent the morning in a room with about a dozen other people, a couple of whom worked for the outsourcer, most of whom worked for the bank, architects, business analysts, project managers, and we spent 2 hours in a room debating their user stories for an OAuth authentication login to the bank. 30, maybe even been 14 people, but we say 12 because they didn't all work for the bank. 12 people in a room debating OAuth stories. A 2-hour meeting, actually 24 hours. I can say man hours because they were all men, typical bank. 24 man hours of expensive architects and project managers. For 24 hours of developer time, a developer could have written you an OAuth prototype and you could have answered most of those questions. Most of the people in that room didn't understand OAuth. You could have built it in the time they spent to decide the user stories. And actually, they didn't even pin them down that much. The outsourcer was going to estimate them and play back a price to them, so it'd be hours after that. It doesn't make sense to do so much planning when CPU cycles are so cheap. You can try and see what happens. So technology change, that's what we're talking about. When technology changes, when you move from IBM mainframes to Raspberry Pis and iPhones, there's a well-established model. When you get a new technology, you do the same thing faster. You do as individuals, organizations do in their processes. You just keep doing the same thing, but you do it faster. Maybe you do it better. Maybe you do it with fewer hands, bit of cost savings there. But essentially, you keep the same processes. After a while, you adopt new processes. Look, this is business analysis 101 for anybody who's studied business analysis. When you introduce new technology, you need to change your processes to maximize the benefit, right? So stage 2 technology adoption, you change your processes, you get more benefit. Stage 3, you then get innovation, that new technology and the process changes. You can see new ways of doing things. You can tackle problems in different ways. You get another round of innovation. Perhaps you get more technology out of it. And you repeat. The best example I know about this is factories and electricity. That picture you can all see on screen there, it's public domain. It's not even completely clear when the photo was taken, but electricity, while it's been known about for centuries, and while in Victorian times we started to be able to do useful things with it, it wasn't until the first decades of the 20th century that we started to use it in factories. And this factory is a great picture because the bulk of the picture is taken up by a stamping machine. And if you look at the top there, there's a wheel that goes around and there's a belt connecting it to the machine. Because the original factories were powered by water wheels, and then there was steam, which gave you circular motion, and your machines were connected to the circular motion. They drove the machines. And there was a limit on how fast the machines could go, and if the belts broke, you had to stop the entire production line. You don't want to stop the production line. and you laid your factories out in a particular way. If you look at a photo of old factories like Ford's Baton Rouge, not Baton Rouge, Rouge plant, it's long and thin because you had the power running down the entire line. The power mechanism dictated the factory layout, and the factory layout dictated the processes you use. Also in this picture, you've got a man finishing a piece of equipment there with a hand machine. He's got an electric cable, and he's polishing something. When electricity came in, electricity allows you to decouple your machines. Electricity allows you to have handheld tools. You can start thinking about changing not only your factory processes, but your factory design, the physical layout of the factories. And actually, to get the full benefit of electricity, you need to change your processes, because if you keep running your machines the way you did when they were steam powered, you won't get the full benefits. You can even go as far as to make an argument that the reason why lean revolution happened in Japan at Toyota was because somebody conveniently destroyed all the Japanese factories in 1945. So when Japan rebuilt their factories, they rebuilt them with electricity. Whereas even today, Ford and General Motors are working in factories which were laid out at the time of steam power. And that has hindered their adoption of lean techniques. Whatever it is, technology change comes before process change and innovation. And that's what's going on here. When we move from 1970s technology to 2020 technology, our processes need to change. The waterfall model is rooted in 1970s technology. And not only the waterfall model, but the project model. So much of our thinking is rooted in the days when CPU cycles were expensive. Agile for me now, Agile is the process change that accompanies digital technology. Whether you're in software development or human resources or accounting or God knows what, when you move to a digital basis, you need Agile-like processes to maximize the benefit of those technologies. And the project model holds us back. Technology change creates business change creates opportunities, which is why we have companies like this. Yeah. How many of these companies have a CEO who gets up in the morning and says, you know what, we've finished, we've built what we set out to do? You know, does the Uber chairman get up and say, all those coders are expensive? I've built an app, I've built a dispatch system, I've built a billing system. I don't need those coders. Our project is over. No. When you're a digital business, your technology drives your business. The idea that you have an end, as you do in the project model, doesn't make sense. We live in a continuous flow environment with continuous improvement, continuous delivery, and hopefully continuous digital business. Continuous is not temporary. The problem is we're using the project model, which is essentially a model for managing a series of temporary things, to managing what is inherently a continuous system. The project model is optimized around scarce resources of mainframes. CPU cycles are limited. Digital technology changes what can be done. So to go back to my question from earlier on, what do you think is the limiting factor now? What are the scarce resources we face now? I think our scarce resources today are people, are talent, are those who can do things. We need a model that doesn't say we gather together a bunch of random individuals, we do something, we disperse them. We need a model that gets those talented people and keeps them continually employed in delivering benefit to the corporation. A model for continuous business, a model that's optimized for talent. And that's why as we move away from the project model, we need to think about how we organize ourselves, and simply we organize around the team. The team is the means of production. The team create value. Work goes into the team, value comes out of the team. The team continue working while they're delivering value. Teams are not static. People join teams, people leave teams, people retire, people get ill. Heaven forbid somebody might have a baby and need to take time off to, teams shouldn't be static. They should be largely stable. They might expand, they might contract, but there's a stability with them. And we fund the teams. We say, we're going to fund a team to do some work. We'll give the team a mission. We may even set OKRs. We say, here's something we want the team to do. The team is staffed with all the skills. It's staffed with business skills, investigative skills, technical skills. It's a digital business. The team will take the mission. They will take the objective. They will investigate it. They will think how they can add value here, and they will do their damnedest to deliver it. And if they can't, they should be able to come back and say, we can't do anything with this mission. Can we go to another mission? Have you got something else we can do? The team is, in fact, a business unit. We flow the work to the team. We have a whole bunch of stable teams, and we flow the work to them. I'd also point out, because everybody loves the Spotify model, don't we? We all love the Spotify. We all know, as agile coaches, as agile people who've been around the block, we all know Spotify don't follow the Spotify model, but we know the corporations throughout the world are in love with the Spotify model. And when you look at it, Spotify model everyone talks about is just a matrix reloaded. But if you look closely at those articles on Spotify, when you get beyond the squads and the teams and the tribes and all of those nice terms, what you find is that Spotify has a set of stable teams. Spotify works on products. Teams work on products. They don't have projects. Spotify is very open to accepting risk, to trialing stuff, to pushing something out there, to measuring the result. Spotify puts a lot of skills into the team. We all get fixated on this idea that the Spotify model is about guilds and tribes and God knows what else. But there's another more interesting Spotify model beyond that. I encourage you to go and look at it. I keep meaning to write this up sometime, but anyway. And the other thing about the team is we're pushing authority down to the team. The team are the means of production. The team are deciding what's valuable. The team are delivering. They aren't constantly having to call out to higher authority to say, can we do this? Can we try something? The team are responsible, they have authority, they get on and do it. And it's one team, they're tasked with a mission, they seek and deliver value, they combine technology, business skills. I like to use the hashtag BizTech, but I've failed, it hasn't caught on, I must delete that. And if necessary, they pull in skills. If they say, for this, we need a really hot UXD person, they go and find a hot UXD person. They either steal from one of the other teams or they go out to the market, they find somebody. What we don't do is say, we've got a team here and the team will obviously need a UXD and a SQL person and a front end and a back end and all the rest of it. Because when you decide the staffing of a team, because of Conway's law, you've also decided the architecture. If you want the team to find the best possible architecture, you need to leave it to the team. And that means you need to understaff the team. I like to talk about, coming up the next slide, isn't it? Actually, it's 2 slides away. I like to talk about the minimally viable team. We don't decide in advance who's going to be on the team. We don't decide the skills. We probably just take one business person, one techie person, put them together, let them do some work. When they get to the end of their time box, they come back and say, no opportunity, we'll do something different. Or they come back and say, hey, we've got an opportunity, we've trialed some technology to go further, we need a DBA and a UXD. Fund us for some more and we'll do this. You don't want too many people in a team. Anyone ever worked on a team where there's too many people? I'll just type in the chat window, yes or no. I've certainly worked on teams where there's too many people. And you know what happens? Nobody goes to the boss and says, you've overstaffed the team, please reduce the team size. You make work to do. You will never have a minimally viable product if you don't have a minimally viable team. The moment you have too many people on the team, you will do more. You'll justify your existence. So flipping back a moment, where was I? Yes, we measure the team on their business impact. What do they actually do? Not what percentage done are they, or not what features they've delivered, but what difference have they made to the business? I have a friend who went to work for Monzo, and she said, I love working here because we come in on Monday morning, we sit down with the team and the product owner, and we decide what we're going to do this week, how we can, our bit of the product, how we can increase eyeballs on the website, or we can increase customer retention or something. We do it. Yeah. So one of the models I like is this idea of the amoeba. You know, you learned about this in probably the first year of high school, the single cell organism, and that's what these teams are. I also use the term stream team sometimes here. Same thing, basically. It's a team which is the means of production. They're our production cell. We start with a minimally viable team. It's just the 1 or 2 amoebas, and if they're successful, we grow them up. Minimally viable team, start small, grow them, add more people. There might come a point where you need to split the team. If the team gets too unwieldy, once you're above your magic number 7, I'm all for growing teams larger. I grow them larger in order to split them. Now, the difficult bit when you split them is you need to work out how you can split them and they can both see value. You can't have a platform team hiding behind a customer-facing team. You need to work out how the platform team really adds value. By the way, if you're a product owner on a platform team, you're the most important person. Well, product owners use the most important person anyway. But I'm fed up of seeing teams where they say, this platform team, they can have a techie as the product owner because the techie needs to know what's doing. Platform teams, it's incredibly hard to see where they add value. So you need your best product owners on the platform team so they can be clear that they're delivering value to the business as a whole with what may look like a technical improvement. So minimally viable teams, grow them, split them. You know, there may come a time where it makes sense to shrink them or even to merge them back together and close them when they aren't delivering benefit, or when you want to invest that money somewhere else, you want to allocate resources elsewhere for strategic reasons, you close them and you move on, you reallocate them. Which brings us on to the thorny subject of money and governance, which I really do need this beer. So what you might be asking at this moment is, how do we know what the team is going to do? Because the team are going to decide. Because our minimally viable team does start to work without a requirements document. How are we to know what stories they're going to deliver, what they're going to do? The answer is you don't. And you probably never did anyway. There's always some random collection of things that got picked to get done. We give the team a mission. And while the team are progressing towards that mission, we continue to fund the team, and we may add money or we don't add money. If this sounds familiar, it's because it's a model that already exists, but it's a model that usually doesn't exist within corporations. It's the venture capital model. If you're going to be a startup, you're going to scrape around, get a bit of money from your credit card, a bit of money from your family and friends. You build something, and if it looks good, you go to a venture capitalist, you go to several, and you pitch to them. And if your idea is good enough, one of them will give you money. And they won't just give you a low sum of money. They'll say, we'll give you the money, but we'll give you it in 3 tranches. Come back in a month's time and tell us what you did with the first tranche, and then we'll give you the second one. And come back a month after that. And if you're spending the money wisely, we'll give you some more. And then when you outgrow that venture capitalist, you get some more. So we're going to trust our teams to do the right thing, to find the thing to do. So we think like a venture capitalist. We may make multiple bets. Funding a minimally viable team is really a question of how much money can you afford to lose? You've got an idea. What are you going to invest in? Where are you strategically going to spend your money? We start early. Don't wait for complete information. Certainly do not wait for a requirements document. If you wait another week, you will certainly have more information. If you wait another week, it'll be another week before you get anything delivered. And because of cost of delay, that will be worth less. You need to start working immediately. You need to start what we call dual track agile. Start discovering the requirements, start discovering what you can deliver, start playing with technology, start small, seed capital, minimal viable team. Success brings you more money, and that brings you more growth. Whew. And this is the key. You want a regular portfolio review. You don't let the team off the leash and say, go away for 6 months to explore and discover strange new requirements and strange new technologies. You say, go away for a month, go away for 3 months. We'll fund this team for a month. In a month's time, come back, we'll do a portfolio review. In effect, do a dragon's den. The team are going to be those entrepreneurs walking into the dragon's den or the shark's tank, and they're going to pitch what they've done, and they're going to pitch the market opportunity they're going to see there. And in the portfolio review, people are going to quiz them and ask them questions. And we want product owners who are a bit entrepreneurial. We want product owners who can do this kind of pitching. We don't want product owners who can just write a boring Word document and show it to people. We want a bit of tension there. We want a bit of friction. And a portfolio review process thinks strategically. And this fits in quite well with the idea that we move away from requirements lists and we move away from estimates. Because once you've got estimates and once you've got lists of things to do, people start, I think it was dry stone walling. Which bits can we fit in here? How many of these user stories can we do if we've got this much and this much capacity? And they move things around. You want to think strategically. I think it's a sin for business people to say to technical people, when will it be done? You don't want that question at all. What you want is for business people to say, if we can have this in a month, we can make 1 million. If we can have this in 3 months, we can make 800,000. If we can have it in 6 months, it's 500,000. If it's a year, don't bother doing it. And then we say to the engineers, what can you give us in a month while there's still 1 million on the table that will deliver some, maybe not all, but some of that 1 million? And we're going to want a solution which you then expand. And in 3 months' time, you can get a bigger share of the pie. This can all be put into the portfolio review process. We drive it from the business. What do we need? When do we need it by? And the engineers create something in that time. So this is what I call continuous digital. It's thinking more like a venture capitalist. It's recognizing we're in a continuous state. It's recognizing the team is the means of production. The teams are stable. The business is the technology. And the technology is the team. Can you, okay, if you think about a bank like, I don't know, what banks have I been inside? I used to be inside Barclays, and you can easily think about the technologists and the business people. Could you think about Monzo or Starling or Revolut, one of the new fintechs? Could you think of making that division in those environments? Honestly, I don't know. Maybe there's someone on this call from one of those banks, but they are inherently the technology they deliver. So it's not that we don't want to divide between business and technology, but those two are the same thing. You could not be a startup bank if it wasn't for the technology. So we need to combine those two things and couple them together. That's why it's a continuous and it's digital. Hence the book. Governed by business benefits, start and build analysis together, optimize for lots of small, diseconomies of scale, fewer big things, just lots of small things. Product over projects, business over products, teams are the means of production. Oof. And I've managed to finish a couple of minutes early. I think when we're online, I don't quite judge the time quite right. Oh. Wilson, are you on mute?
Yes, I had to mute the hard button on the laptop and trying to unmute here. Cool. Thank you very much, Alan. Thank you very much. It was amazing. I have to say, I got my copy of the continuous digital this last weekend. I haven't got the chance yet to read it, but I'm really looking forward if it follows in the same line of your other book of the project, myopia. I'm certainly I will love it. So I think we can open the floor. Well, we have few questions in Slido. Do you have it open on your side?
Yes,
Alan?
I do.
Okay, so starting from the top, if you want to start with those ones, I will mark them as
Yeah,
answered as we go.
okay. Anonymous. Given you worry about management giving commitments to teams, how do you describe how vision differs from commitments?
That was me. I'm anonymous.
Yeah, I have a problem with commitment. I think you can be committed to things, but if you want to take chances, if you want to take risks, you see this with entrepreneurs all the time. You try and do things which you aren't completely sure are going to work. And if you stick to the things that you feel as if you can commit to doing, I worry that you limit your own abilities. And I also worry about the way Scrum has changed a bit over the years, but the way Scrum used to advocate teams committed to doing stuff and they moved heaven and earth to get it done, which always gave an incentive on the technical team to undercommit and an incentive on the business to force more onto the technical team. And over the years, the word commitment became devalued and it ceased meaning commitment. It just meant the stuff we're going to do. So I don't really want people to give commitments, but I do want them to dream. I do want them to have vision, and maybe I don't really see a conflict there.
Well, commitment is, I mean, I accept what you're saying about commitment because it's about, but you gave me the conversation you said earlier about what was wrong with projects. I wanted to know what was right with vision. Right. So if I'm running a group of teams, maybe one or more teams, I don't want to steer them, but I want them to share my vision. I want them therefore to achieve my vision. I express my vision in terms of objectives, but not in how, in why. How do I do this?
I think for you, that's partly a sales thing. You need to sell the vision, and also you need to allow them to project their own visions into your own vision. And it's not so much that I want the team to share the vision, but I want them to be focused on delivering value, delivering benefit, to be moving towards that goal. And I want them to be regularly challenging themselves to say, how are we moving towards this goal? Let me give you an example. The teams I worked with last year, we were using OKRs. And the team I was working most with, we gave up on the backlog. We threw the backlog away. And every 3 months, we set OKRs. And then we might think about what in the backlog might move us towards this. But we try to take a clean sheet every 3 months and say, this 3 months, our goal is going to be this. Yes, we're doing release every 2 weeks, but every 3 months, we're going to step back. We're going to think about how we deliver benefit to this organization. We'll encode that in an objective, and then we will try during the next 3 months to reach that objective. And we'll work that out during the 3 months. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And I mean, to me, the vision needs to be shared and owned by everybody. It's not just me telling you what it is, although I can start by saying my vision is this, but then it's the collaboration around that. And also, I think roadmaps and things should be about objectives and not about features and things.
Yes, absolutely. We better move on.
Thank you.
The next two up vote. Wilson, you win. 2 votes. SAFE, what are your thoughts? Hinder or support the continuous digital model? I guess part of me would like to say SAFE is snake oil. It's basically selling the same old stuff and it's wrapping it up in a corporate friendly wrapper, which, but you know what? I think I've gradually moved towards the conclusion SAFE is meaningless, because what everyone treats SAFE and Less and DAD and all the others, they are sold as a price fix menu. You know, you go into the restaurant and you're choosing off the price fix menu. This is, you pay this price, this is what you're gonna get. That's what SAFE and Co sell you. But actually, everybody universally treats it as an a la carte menu. Everybody goes to and say, okay, we like the product increments. We like the big room planning. We're not keen on that bit over there. And oh, the technical excellence, we'll leave that to one side. So I think these big scaling frameworks, a bit like Scrum before them, is they are sold as a solution to a problem. And I tip my hat to Boston Consulting and my friends at McKinsey. I think they're really good at selling solution. The problem, as Agile folks say, is we say, oh, we're going to examine your problem and talk to the people, and we'll give you a bunch of incremental improvements, and we'll get towards a better world. And my belief is that McKinsey's and BCG and friends walk in and they say, we've got this solution for you, and it's going to improve your bottom line and give you a higher ROI. It's called Safe, Sign Here. And actually they sell it. And then when they get into the detail, they try and work it out. Now, I know people, I go to one of those consultancies invites me to their internal conferences. And I tell you, they're people are the same as we are. And they battle with the same problems. It's just those consultancies are better at selling solutions. Alan,
fair enough.
Alan, Project to Product by Mick Kirsten. I know of it. I haven't read the book. I know a little bit about what he's saying, and I don't think it's a million miles away. I think, as I said at the beginning, I wasn't alone in inventing no projects. The ideas were floating around. It was just me and some other people put our head above the parapet, and some people like Kirsten have perhaps expressed it in a less adversarial way. Alan, another one of your questions is top. What has been your experience with the younger generations as they have not worked on the old? Oh yeah, it's a great one. I was doing a training course for a company in Leeds a few years ago, and day 2 I was doing the bit about why the waterfall doesn't work and why Agile's better. And I realized there's a bunch of people in the room who I knew were recent graduates, and they were looking at me, you know, kind of wondering what the hell I was talking about. I got to the coffee break, and they said, why would anyone work like that anyway? So I think in many cases, they're a different kind of sell, because they're more honest. They force us to think about what are the benefits we're providing, a bit like that goal displacement. Some of us Agile folk have got a bit hung up on the goal is to get rid of the evil waterfall. And actually, we need to think about how are we making things better? So I think millennials, and so I think they go along with this stuff. I think the other thing about millennials is a lot of them are just, they live in a very uncertain world. And we aren't helping them live in a more certain world. Oh, your questions disappeared. I was going to double check I got everything there, but Wilson, leave it there for a moment while I go through them. Another anonymous, might be you again, Mike. Do you have example of regulated companies, aerospace, automotive, that use no project concept, that lack formal requirements? Yes, medical companies. One of my favorite clients down in Falmouth, and they're my favorite client because they're a great bunch of guys to work with, and they make the hardware and the software for making babies. And I really do mean they make hardware and software for making babies, because they produce IVF equipment. So they do talk about the essential elements. And I worked with them a few years ago. They are very product focused. They have products like microscopes, software for tracking RFID tags. They also do software for their own manufacturing processes. And it's very much a product approach. While back then they used some of the lingo of projects, it was very much product improvement. And the trick there was, first of all, they wrote themselves an exemption. They can step outside of their regulated processes because they're trying to experiment, which they're allowed to do. And then they got a process that worked for them, an Agile, pretty much like my Zampan method. If anybody's seen my Zampan, it's actually in the book. And then when they had that working reasonably well enough, they codified that in their process documents. So my standard advice for this stuff is get a process that works for you and then codify it. If you try and create a process and then work to the process, you're going to find your process doesn't work because you don't have perfect foresight. Aerospace, another one of the companies I've worked with in Cornwall, though not so closely, they produce software for aerospace companies. So you can do this. You take more of a product approach. And the thing about all these regulated environments, the regulators usually aren't very didactic on projects and things. There's a bunch of outputs they want to see. And if you can show that you produce the outputs, then they don't care whether you have a project or a product or what, God knows what. I've heard, although I haven't been able to validate it, that the FDA in the US prefer companies that work in an agile fashion because they believe the quality is higher. Okay, let me move on. Wilson, again, you've been very popular. What qualities would you look for people staffing continuous model? Ooh, good one. Tricky. I've not thought about that. I think there's something inherent in the fact that you want stability that probably is playing towards a permanent culture rather than a contract culture. You want people, at least the core of a team, who are going to hang around. You may supplement them during times when you need to grow the team, but you probably want more permanent people than contract people. Or you need, like one of the other companies I know in Cornwall, who they work on a long-term nearshoring basis. So they have teams for companies, and the companies don't outsource projects to them. The companies have a long-term framework agreement and agree to give them amounts of work each year, and the same people work at the same companies. So I think you want some stability, though, as I said before, you don't want too much stability. You don't want groupthink. And I also worry that if the team is completely stable, would you get the necessary diversity? Would you be able to bring in new ideas? So I must think more about that one. Metrics for a team that has recently started working on Scrum. The difficulty with metrics in our business is they kind of get abused, and they get abused for a couple of reasons. The only metric I know which really stands up is lead time or cycle time. How long does it take from an idea coming into existence, maybe entering your backlog, to actually being delivered and in front of customers? What's the elapsed time? And what you will quickly discover if you start looking at elapsed time, that the bulk, so you get the elapsed time, and you find the elapsed time is what, 6 months. And you say, okay, how can we increase that? And that's a good goal to have. It's a metric that can drive towards doing good stuff. So you get this metric, cycle time, and then you work about reducing it. What you will find very quickly is the majority of the time spent by almost any item is sitting in a backlog, waiting to be worked on. So the team I mentioned before I was working with last year, and we started using OKRs, that was part of what we discovered. When we looked at the analytics, we found that the team were very good at turning around small pieces of work. The average life expectancy of a reported bug was under 24 hours. But the mean time for completing an item in the backlog was months. There were items that lingered in the backlog for years, while there was an awful lot of bugs that got fixed very quickly. Some stuff lingered for years. And this was part of the reason we moved towards OKRs and resetting the clock every 3 months. Just producing OKRs that guarantee to do things that have been in the backlog isn't particularly useful. So start with a blank sheet of paper, set some OKRs or other objectives for a short period, and look at the cycle time between you coming up with an idea and you deciding to do that idea. How long does it take to get out of the door? Be careful with it, though. If you've not come across Goodhart's law, please check out Goodhart's law before you pursue any metrics. Charles Goodhart is retired now. He was a professor at the LSE. He was also one of the Bank of England's interest rate setters. He's a serious economist, and he coined Goodhart's law, which says any statistical measurement which becomes a target will change its behavior. And he got it from economic analysis, but it's been shown by social scientists in many other domains so far. The classic one in Agile is velocity. If you start saying to a team, great, you delivered 20 points last time, let's see if we can get 30 points in the next iteration, the team will meet your goal. How they meet it is another matter. They will change the way they're doing it. So metrics are a great source of information, but they can be a terrible target. So cycle time. What do you do in an industry that isn't driven by money? Brilliant. So money is really easy to measure. Money is great because it's numeric and so on. But if you look at the definition of what money is a store of value. Money itself is not value. You know, try getting bread flour 3 months ago. It didn't matter how much money you had, you couldn't get bread flour. You know, think about what is valuable to you. So a few years ago, I met some people from the Department of International Development, and what was important to them was children getting an education. It was clean drinking water in sub-Saharan Africa, things like that. When we talk about value, we immediately think of money. I agree. But actually, what are the things your organization values? What are the values? What are the things your organization, your industry wants? So for aerospace, you know, it's safe takeoffs and landings. It's not crashing the plane. They are the things that are valuable. So they are the things you're going to use. If your aim is to reduce the burn on an airplane engine, to reduce carbon dioxide, that's value to you. The fact that it may or may not produce money is secondary. And I've come across this several times in the charity sector. They almost, it's easy for commercial companies because they want money. But when you get beyond the money, it's actually easier in the not-for-profit sector because those organizations usually understand their values a bit better. Whew. Alan, we're back to you. Change is hard. Without blowing up the factory, how have you influenced change in orgs to allow funding and autonomy with movement to no projects? Whew. Let me think. For starters, don't run in their face and wave the no projects umbrella. No projects, like extreme programming, is something that dare not speak its name. Josh Arnold once said it's like Fight Club. The first rule is don't mention it. I think you can influence behavior. The things to talk about are digital and our products. They're the angles to push on rather than projects. I think also trying to work with the what are benefits, what are your goals, and step away from the idea that success is on schedule, on budget, on features. Start to say to people, from this piece of work, whether you call it a project or a quarter or whatever, for this piece of work, what would success look like? How should we measure success on this? And I actually think if you do that early enough, you can get away from the on schedule, on budget. And if they do say, oh, on schedule, then challenge them, you know, and start saying, look, we're trying to work more agile here. So there may be things we can do early. What would be valuable to have earlier? Try and move the conversation onto the benefits. And I think over time, the project model will just fall away. It's quite interesting when this well-known consultancy, I was at their internal conference the other month, as I said, and what I found interesting was nobody was talking about projects. They were talking about benefits and they were talking about digital and all that, but the word project wasn't being offered. You don't win the fight by having everyone accept that no project was right, or I wrote a great book. You're going to win this one by pushing on the things people really want. Another Andrew RH. Funding is often caused in project thinking. Yes. What do you see as a non-project way? This, I think, is where the challenge is. And I think this is the challenge for the next 5 years, is getting organizations to unlearn the project funding model. And I know of a couple of what we would call digital agencies who have done that. I know of one of the Cornish companies, in fact, where the man who runs it, a few years ago, he sacked his clients who wanted a defined outcome for a defined fee and a defined time, because he realized they were working agile, and it was a collaborative way. So both the agencies I know who do this, rather than bidding on a piece of work and saying, look, here's a list of all the things we're going to do for you, and this is how long we think it will take, and this is how much we'll charge. What they do is they say, your goal is this, your goal is an online shop, your goal is more visitors, your goal is whatever. We will work with you to find out how we can achieve that. And we will develop any technology that's needed, but we will bring the extra skills because we're good at analysis, because we understand what makes digital work. A friend of mine, Benjamin Mitchell, came up with this analogy years ago. He doesn't remember, but I remember it vividly. He said, imagine you are going to get married and you go to the best tailor in town and you say, make me look fantastic, make me look $1 million. And the tailor measures you up and takes all the measurements and then steps back. And you can see by the look on the tailor's face that the tailor is worried. And you say, what was the matter? And the tailor says, oh, it's not my business to tell you, sir. And you say, no, I must know. I must look fantastic for my partner, my life partner to be. I'm trying to avoid gender-specific language here, so forgive me if I must look fantastic. And the tailor says, you know, if you really want to look fantastic, you need to lose 5 kilos. Right? You go to a tailor with the expectation they're going to make you a brilliant suit. But what you really want is to look fantastic on your wedding day. Now the tailor, because the tailor has dressed umpteen people for umpteen weddings over many years, the tailor knows what will make you look good, and the tailor knows how to cut a suit. And ultimately the tailor may say, the best way to look good is to lose some weight. Now, in your professional careers as digital technology experts, what are you? Are you a tailor that listens to your customers and you nod and say, yes, yes, no, yes, yes, we can certainly do that. Yes, we'll make you look fantastic. The price is this. Or are you a tailor who is prepared to challenge your clients? A tailor who is really an image consultant who happens to make beautiful suits and dresses? And what does your organization and what does that client want? A lot of the companies that go to digital agencies, they go into a digital agency because they don't understand this stuff. And they may go in thinking they've done their best in writing a document, but really to sell them something on the basis of that document is a con, because you know they're going to change their mind. And you probably might be banking to make money out of that. If you want to laugh, one of my other books, my Zampan book, the screens, if I move it like that, you can see it. Zampan, XAPN. In the start of that, the preface, I've got a little thing I wrote called Dear Customer, the Truth About IT. If you Google it, you can find it as well. I can several places. I make a joke about this situation that we quote people on things and we really don't know what they want. We know we're going to make money as we go along. I hope that helps. If by the way, if I've not answered any of your questions or you want to talk more about this, drop me an email tomorrow and we can continue in some form. Shabina, what systems that last a long time and keep changing? What's the best approach to hold on to decisions, requirements, processes for the future reference? I don't really know. I'm going to say the answer isn't writing a document. It isn't even a knowledge management system, because those things go unread. I do know that things that are important, we don't forget. I know most of us don't leave our houses much these days, but when you leave your house, do you take with you a piece of paper with your address on? Do you have a piece of paper that if you forget your address, you can look it up? Okay, you probably have it on your driver's license in your wallet or your purse. But the truth is we don't consciously leave our house with our home address. We don't leave with a note around us saying, if I get lost, return me to. Important stuff we remember. Important stuff becomes ingrained into our way of working, our way of living. Things that are really important, we don't need to hold on to. Now, I am dyslexic, and my form of dyslexia has a poor short-term memory, and I am utterly hopeless at remembering things even in the short term. I have a fantastic long-term memory, atrocious short-term memory. So it's about inventing techniques, sending myself emails, sending myself text, writing myself post-it notes, writing myself reminders. Perhaps some of those things, you want to write them large, you want to put them on the wall, you want to spell it out in 10-foot high letters.
Allan, can I just add some context to that? I'm so sorry to interrupt, but I'm talking about the type of systems you were talking about at the beginning, right? That last years, yes. And hopefully, though we intend for the same team to be stable and to be with them, the reality we know, people leave, people come in, and the thing is, I mean,
there's a very easy answer. Tests. Okay. Tests. You write a test that reflects that decision. And you write a test, and if that decision ever gets changed, if that requirement ever gets, if someone goes in and changes it, then the test breaks. And you know about it very quickly. It doesn't stop somebody from forgetting. It doesn't stop somebody from trying to change a really important requirement. But what it does ensure is that if anybody does change it, then you know about it in about 15 minutes. So the more of these things you get, the more requirements, decisions that must be remembered for the future, the more difficult you make it for somebody who joins the team later. The more a new person has to learn before they do anything. If you code these things up as tests, then you can't guarantee they remember, but you know for sure that if it gets broken, you'll know about it very quickly. The other thing you can try and do is stay close to industry norms. Don't reinvent the wheel. Not because reinventing the wheel takes time, but because reinventing the wheel also increases the load on people who are new. Okay, I hope that answers your question. Is that okay?
To a great degree, yes, thank you.
Now, the next one, I love this one. How does this work for ERP, SAP? Not project dev and maintenance, many different modules. I groan, but I love your question because I've been here. I know this stuff. The thing about ERP systems is, do you remember those slides I showed of an IBM mainframe in 1970? That's an ERP system. ERP systems are the product of the mainframe age. I know one or two companies that rather than buying SAP or Microsoft Dynamics or whatever, they've just written the bits they need. And when you buy an ERP system, you buy somebody else's existing legacy system. It's just been dressed up quite nicely. I would like to think that ERP systems will go away, that modern technology will render them pointless. I think I'm probably wrong. I think ERP systems are here to stay. And I think very slowly ERP systems are moving to this world, but as they are effectively mainframes reincarnated, the main problem is the culture around them. There's a lot of agile stuff you can do with an ERP system, and there's a lot of even things like automated testing you can do with ERP systems, but you probably can't download the open source to do it. You probably have to roll some of your own. You need to invest in that. It will pay back with shorter cycle times and easier maintenance. The other problem you have, of course, in an ERP system is the supplier's own maintenance update. Again, tests can help there. If you wrap your ERP system in tests, when SAP ship you a new update and it breaks part of your system, the tests will tell you pretty quickly. My experience of SAP and other ERP systems is the main difficulty is really culture. And that is because so many of the people who program these systems, and I deliberately use the word program, do not see themselves as programmers or software engineers. They see themselves, they probably even trained as accountants or HR consultants, and they do not believe that the table-based system they are laying out is a form of programming. To those of us who study this stuff, it's just a different form of programming, but they do not believe it's programming. They believe it's something else. And as with ordinary software developers 10 years ago, and some still today, trying to get them to take the engineering practices seriously is really difficult because they don't see themselves as culturally part of that. So I don't have any solutions. I have worked on this on a few occasions and I'm still looking for a solution myself. Someone said no automation, old school, very much so.
Apologies to belabor this. I lived a lot of my life in this area and I'm really groping for some answers. Is there a way to cut it in smaller ways? I couldn't figure it out. Maybe you have some ideas, because if I may say, the MVP is organization-wide and it has to go live on a certain day, and you can't, or at least I couldn't figure out in doing small increments. And as you say, people from very different cultures of finance, engineering, and so come together. So yeah, I'm just restating the problem. Yes,
I mean, one of the things about ERP systems, and this harks back to the business process re-engineering movement, is it's a question of how much do you re-engineer a building and the process, the company, and how much do you re-engineer a system? I believe, so the last ERP I worked with was Microsoft Dynamics, and Microsoft were, because Dynamics was supposed to be .NET based, in theory, we could get some of the agile tools to work with it. Since it was programmed in, believe it or not, X++.NET, it was incredibly difficult. I believe, I'm not sure, some of the more modern SAP systems can be programmed in JavaScript rather than ABAP. So I think it may unfortunately be that we're tied to the vendors moving forward. Matthias, oh, nice to see you, Matthias. Any tips on how we can move output, features, hours, orientation to outcome, value, profit? So two thoughts. One, let me point you at somebody else. There's a gentleman called Mike Burrows who he has an ethos he calls agenda shift. And Mike is very focused on outcomes. Wilson, you should invite Mike to speak. Mike's very focused on outcomes, and might be, if you look in some of Mike's agenda shift stuff, you'll get some answers. One of my attempts is I like to put value on stories. I like to get a story and write, ideally a dollar amount, but I'm happy to put business points or something else, some idea of the value on stories, and then we can start to compare stories. Where's the value? And we can change the conversation from how long will this take to do to how much value is this worth? And I'm very happy to use estimates for that. In fact, when I do the estimation, I play a version of planning poker with stakeholders, and we put value on stuff. And they estimate, and you can then have a conversation about what is really higher, what is really lower. And I dream of one day seeing a burn up diagram where instead of showing points being burned down to completion, we're seeing value being burnt up. I think if we can start to find some way of quantifying what we're delivering and showing how we're delivering more value, we can perhaps move the conversation closer towards outputs. we could probably continue debating that for a while. We're also on time, so thank you very much, everyone who's listening.
Yeah, great stuff. Great stuff. Thank you, Alan. Thank you, everyone who has participated. We had a lot of good questions. I think you replied, you answered around 15 or 16 questions. So was a lot. Seems
Marathon.
not. Yes, it is. We could continue here all night, I believe, but unfortunately we have to close it, because you also have a commitment that you have done to your son, Alan, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, I'm going to say.
Okay, so thank you very much, everyone. Please do answer to that feedback form, so that I know what worked well and what we could improve. I will share with you as well, Alan, the responses, so that you have some insight as well. I don't know, Alan, are you going to share your share your slide deck in PDF or something?
I normally, as it's an evening, I'd normally post the slides up tomorrow, but this